Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Amira Armond. I'm with Kieri Solutions and CMMC and today I'm interviewing Steve Pratt from Sentar. Steve has passed his CCP and CCA exams, and was the person who led Sentar through their CMMC Level 2 audit or assessment to become an authorized C3 PAO. So I'm really glad to have you today.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm hoping to do a series of recorded interviews with people who have successfully passed a DIBCAC assessment. That's the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center, DIBCAC, a division of the DCMA, a DoD assessment organization. So I'm trying to review people who have successfully passed their assessments, whether it's a CMMC Level 2 assessment or an 800-171 assessment, to understand precedent, what works. So today, the initial topic is we can talk about change management and configuration management. So I've got our assessment guide, the CMMC Level 2 assessment guide open, but let me search for changes. Hopefully I can find it. Nope, of course I can't. Okay, I give up. So for change management, how do you guys do change management?
Well, so I am a ITIL certified person as well. Previous company I worked for, the IT department, was ISO 20000. So that's where I really started for change management. The requirements under 171 are that you do some sort of change management. It's loose on the actual stated requirements, other than that you should do a security impact analysis before approving. So I started by writing an ISO 20000 compliant change management process. So we have a change advisory board. We meet on a monthly basis. We have a SharePoint site set up with the SharePoint forms. This could easily be done in a ticketing system as well. But our change management starts with anyone in the company can request a change by going to the SharePoint site and filling out the form. Then someone from our IT department, or whichever, depending on the change, whoever would be responsible for owning that system that would require the change, would then look at the form, ask any questions of the change requester at any point, and then finalize the form for review by the change advisory board. And like I said, that board meets once a month. They will review the change. If there are any questions by the board, the security impact analysis is performed before the board meeting. They'll look at that. We do have security people on the advisory board to look at that, make sure that it was done properly. Then the change will either be approved or not approved. If it is approved, then a date to implement the change will be set. The change will be made. There's always a rollback plan that has to be approved as well before a change is approved. If the change is successful, then in the next advisory board meeting, they will review the change and state whether it's successful or not, and then it's officially closed.
So let me pull you back.
Okay.
So I love how the first thing you said about changes is you have an ITIL background.
Yes.
Because that's the same background that I have from back in like 2000. I was introduced to change management through the ITIL framework, which is kind of like a best practice framework for how to run an IT department, not a security department, just a plain old IT department. And it talks about this process of having a breakdown of, these are incidents, these are service requests, these are changes, and they define the differences between them. And they say basically you should have that change approval board. I call it change approval board, CAB. What do you call it? A
change advisory board.
change advisory board. Yeah.
Yeah, it's change management board. Depending on the standard, they use different terms, but well, roughly the same thing.
So and that's, I think that is kind of what assessors expect, is that ITIL based change management, or the ISO 2000 you mentioned, change management, right? Those best practices. So it's not just the simple requirements listed in the assessment guide, which say, changes to the systems are tracked, they're reviewed, approved or disapproved in logs. Most assessors are kind of looking for those best practices around change management. Is that your experience as well?
It is, and if you're doing that, at the ITIL or ISO 20000 level, you're meeting all of those. It's in my mind, it's maybe difficult for a small company with a one-person IT department to do a lot of that. You can still have a change advisory board made up of non-IT people as well, and explain that impact. But it's really hard to get to the approval stage when you're in a really small company. So I think that's why 171A or 171 is written the way it is, to give that flexibility. But definitely feel assessors are looking for a mature process, and one that's based on a formal or a older standard that has been around a while and proven. I think is good to have.
What is a change? Like, is installing a piece of software on one person's computer a change? Is creating an account a change?
So that should always be defined in your change management plan, and we do define that. If it is a change that affects the system as a whole, or anything that can affect the security of a system, then we consider it a change. We do have things that are called standard changes. So our monthly patching, we will approve once a year. So we'll say these patches are released by, let's say, Microsoft on a monthly basis on this day of the month. Our plan is to test them on a small subset of systems or devices. If it's successful, the week later we will roll it out to the company, and then we'll have that approved, that process approved in a change advisory board meeting, and we'll say this is approved for 1 year, and then the following year we'll bring that back up. We will talk about how that went, if we need to adjust that process or not. That way you're not constantly requiring a change approval every time you have to patch a system. We do the same thing with adding software to a computer. Example you gave, we have a process. We have a software whitelist of approved software. And we have a process that we have approved, that's been approved by the change board, again, for an extended period of time, so that we don't have to review it each time someone requests software. That if it's on that whitelist, we approve our process for how we approve that request. If it's not on the whitelist, there is another board that we have that will review the software, what the security impact of adding that new software to our whitelist is. It's added to the whitelist before it is provided to the end user.
So you would consider authorizing a new type of software, a new application in your environment to be a change, not necessarily pushing it out to individual computers, but allowing it in the environment at all would be a change. Is that correct?
Correct. So the group that will review the software to see if it would be put on our whitelist, that once they recommend that it be added to the whitelist, that would have to go before a change board as well for their approval.
Did Sentar put policies or documents through a formal change process? That's kind of like, I'm not sure. Some people think you should, some people think it doesn't need to be, that's a different thing. That's quality management, whatever. What was your experience?
We do. So you mentioned quality management. We're CMMI as well. So we follow the same process for that. If any document we have that we have declared a controlled document has to go through the change board before it is approved. And so that, all of our CMMI documents are our SSP, all of our policies and procedures that support our SSP are control documents and therefore go through the control process. And we have a process asset library where these are stored. And so that people can go and get the latest version and have access to that latest version. And in fact, well, from the DIBCAC standpoint, we did under our first the first time we went through the DIBCAC assessment, we had 4 POAM items, and then we had a Delta assessment 3 months later. And one of the POAM items was due to an inconsistency with our SSP and our procedure, where one had been updated and the other one had not. And so we had to make a change to our SSP to match the updated procedure, and that had to go through our change management process. DIBCAC will check that. So if you have a controlled document and you state that your documents go through your change process, even though that's a 5-minute fix in your SSP, they would not accept that to be done the same week because they knew it was impossible to go through our change management process in that short amount of time. So while we would have passed that one control of having the correct information in our SSP, we would have failed our change management at that. So so we took that and ran it through our process, had a new version to present to them when we did our Delta assessment.
Awesome. I think that's well, actually, so for evidence, how did you present evidence to DIBCAC that you were doing change management and the security impact reviews? What did that look like?
So we for evidence, we always err on the caution of documenting heavily because documentation is your friend in an assessment. So we showed the minutes from our change advisory board. We showed the change request where it had been submitted for the change in that SSP. The minutes from the board meeting where they reviewed it, discussion that happened through that, the change impact was presented. We showed that approval, and then we were able to show the new SSP with the approval date on it and the new signatures.
Did you ever have the same person put forward a change and also approve their own change?
No. So again, the change is approved by a board of 10 individuals that all vote. So we do have people that are on the board that will that do request a change, and they have a vote just like everybody else. But those 10 people all have to vote for the approval. And sometimes we have approvals that are conditional. So I can't think of a good example, but they may say we approve this on the condition that you also perform this at the same time, and so they'll revise the change process for that specific change to include that. But yeah, so to answer your question, I guess in a way we've had someone, on the approval board that's requested change, but to capture that separation, we do require a vote of all 10.
Do you, after the changes are done, do you have a review process of completed changes that's formalized at all?
Correct. So after the changes are done, they are reviewed. That change is reviewed in the next advisory meeting, along with the schedule of uncompleted changes that have been approved is reviewed each meeting, and then for each one that has been implemented, we review that. Mostly just the change. The IT person implemented the change will state it was performed on this. We did these tests afterwards to include that it was operating as intended, and that that anything that might have changed security wise was captured, and that we're still meeting the compliance, and then that's just presented and recorded in the meeting minutes.
Did Sentar have alternate types of changes? So you're describing a very full-featured change with thorough review, thorough impact analysis, lots of people involved. Do you have a process for, say, minor changes or for emergency changes, expedited stuff?
Yes. So our plan also discusses what to do in an emergency change. In those cases, the IT manager can approve an emergency change, and the security impact analysis is still reviewed. The change is implemented, and at the very next change advisory board meeting, that change is presented. This occurred. This is why it was an emergency. This is what we did to change. This is what we did to verify after the fact that security was not impacted. So we do have that ability to react quickly if there's something like an outage or some disaster.
Last question that I can think of. So scope of applicability. So for CMMC, we have CUI assets, and then we have contractor risk managed assets, and specialized assets, even out of scope assets. I didn't ask you whether your information system included any contractor risk managed assets, but as an assessor, would you consider the change management process to be applicable to the whole information system, even stuff that is not specifically a CUI asset or a security protection asset, something that's not directly accessible?
So in our case, our change management plan applies to our whole corporate infrastructure, and our SSP, which is a subset system, refers to that change management plan and states we follow the corporate change management plan and references that, and in effect it inherits from our corporate process. So in those cases, as an assessor, I would expect that that contractor risk management assets would be included in that, because I would expect the entire system to be covered by that, because I'm only assessing the system itself as a C3PAO. I'm going to only focus on what is being in scope. Then I would only be looking at those assets that are in scope to ensure that they're following the change process. And I would consider, since the process or the plan is written for the entire corporate, I would expect contractor risk management assets to be included in that as well. Now, somebody might write a change management plan that says this is only going to apply to these systems and CUI assets and CUI protection assets, and the way as you know, the way those assets are looked at, the 171 controls, you only do a full assessment on those CUI assets and CUI protection assets. So it could be written to where that might not be under that. I think that's not a good practice to do it that way. I think it should apply to the contractor risk management assets as well, because that's how you manage risk, is to apply what you can.
There's definitely some disagreement about there's a set of requirements in 800-171 which can apply broadly. They can apply from boundary to boundary, right? So who cares about stuff that's out of scope, that has, very good logical or physical separation from your CUI? Not too concerned about it. But if it's inside the boundary, if it can affect your CUI, there's a subset of requirements, stuff like setting permissions in a diligent manner, or controlling who has access to the information system. Change management, where if you're not doing those things for the full system, then you can actually give people access to your CUI and not even know that you did it.
Right.
So it's we're not totally sure what the precedent is on that, but a lot of those that subset of requirements, they're basically ineffective if you don't apply them boundary to boundary, even if you have contractor risk managed assets in the middle.
I agree. I agree. And in my opinion, you should apply as many of the 171 controls as you can to anything that's in scope. I realize that the reason they have given that leeway is because there are in some cases where control cannot be applied, and that gives some leeway there. But I agree. If it's in your boundary, if you're not doing those things, you can inadvertently give access. The example I like to use with contractor risk management asset, if you have an enclave, complete VDI environment in the cloud where all your CUI is located, it never leaves that. You're only using thin clients to connect to that. A lot of people will try to make those thin clients out of scope, because there's only a keyboard, mouse, and video going across. Well, what if a keylogger is installed on that thin client? What if you're sitting at Starbucks and somebody's shoulder surfing you while you're using that thin client? There should be reasonable controls in place. I think a thin client should be a managed system with antivirus on there to prevent keyloggers, screen protectors, or policies in place saying you only use this in a secure environment. Secure meaning where people unauthorized to view CUI would not be able to shoulder surf. You should have some sort of plan in place for those end pieces as well, even though they are really only connecting in a VDI type connection.
Absolutely. And that, what you're talking about with the VDI and the endpoint, there's some very strong precedent from especially the C3PO assessments, where I would say probably 19 out of 20 were required to do security on their endpoints. And then a very few were able to call those out of scope, which I'm still trying to understand how that worked for them. But we'll get there eventually. I'll track those guys down. So Steve, are you up for another session on configuration management after this one?
Sure.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll move on to that one. Thank you all.
Okay.
And look for the next video in a bit.